she never saw it coming. How a waitress silenced a billionaire with perfect Italian at 3 a.m. The clock struck 3, the world outside was draped in shadows, and the quaint little diner on the corner of Elm and Pine buzzed with an electric tension. Normally, the late-night crowd was filled with sleepy truckers and giggling teenagers, but tonight? Tonight was different. Tonight, whispered rumors of a mysterious billionaire prowled the dimly lit booths, his presence thick enough to smother the air. Margot, the waitress, flipped coffee mugs with practiced ease, but her heart raced faster than the old clock on the wall could tick. She had heard he was ruthless, a man who crashed parties just to cause chaos. No one really knew what drove him, but they all spoke in hushed tones of his Italian roots, saying his temper was as fiery as a fresh marinara sauce simmering on a stove. Suddenly, the door swung open, and in walked a man draped in an expensive tailored suit, his confidence pulsating like the neon "open" sign outside. As he glanced around, he caught Margot's eye, and then something shifted. She felt an unexpected shiver roll down her spine. There was a darkness there, lurking just beneath the perfect facade. He ordered with a voice as smooth as aged whiskey, his words laced with a sharp accent that echoed danger. But what most startled Margot was the way her chest tightened. She could tell he was looking for a meal. He wanted something more, something she couldn't yet understand. As she took his order, her hands trembled, barely keeping the notepad steady. The other patrons leaned in, straining to overhear snippets of the conversation, eyes wide and whispers erupting like fireworks. What does he want from her? Someone hissed. The tension in the air grew thick, suffocating everyone like a heavy fog. Moments later, a shrill laugh cut through the noise, drawing attention back to the playful young couple in the booth behind the billionaire. But he hadn't blinked, his eyes were fixated on Margot as if she held the key to a secret he desperately craved. Before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. Margot felt the anticipation in the room swell like an ominous tide. The billionaire leaned back, his gaze still piercing into her as if demanding answers. She felt a pang in her stomach, a mix of fear and adrenaline bubbling within her. What do you want? She almost whispered, the question escaping before she could stop it. And just like that, she realized she had no idea what she was about to unleash. The words hung in the air, crackling with energy. What lay ahead was both terrifying and thrilling. As the diner door swung shut behind the last customer, Margot knew it was just the beginning. What did he expect from this unassuming waitress? She, too, was beginning to wonder. The billionaire's lips curled into a slow, dangerous smile, revealing a set of white teeth that contrasted sharply with the darkness of his expression. It was the kind of smile that sent chills racing up Margot's spine. She stood frozen, the coffee pot clutched in her shaking hand, as a silence blanketed the diner. The atmosphere thickened, heavy with unspoken secrets. You have something I need, he replied, his voice low and compelling. The other patrons held their breath, captivated by the unfolding drama that felt as fragile as a glass waiting for the slightest touch to shatter it. The laughter of the young couple faded into the background like an echo lost in the wind. What do you mean? Margot's own voice surprised her, firm yet trembling. Deep down, she wished she hadn't provoked him. Yet something in her sparked with defiance and urge to challenge this man cloaked in mystery. He leaned in slightly, his breath brushing against her ear. I'm aware of your talents. We both know you don't belong here, serving coffee to people like me. You have potential beyond these walls. His words dripped with a mixture of temptation and menace, each syllable hanging in the air like a weight. Margot's heart thundered in her chest. She had always dreamed of more than this life, an escape from the diner, a world beyond the greasy tables and low chatter. But this? This was different. What do you want? She repeated, stronger this time, yet fear tinged her words. Join me, he suggested, leaning back, satisfaction gleaming in his dark eyes. There's a world ripe for the taking, and you could be a part of it. The allure of escaping her mundane reality gripped her fiercely. She had imagined grandeur, excitement, but the tantalizing offer from a man whose intents were shrouded in shadows made her stomach twist. The silence in the diner morphed, becoming oppressive. Other customers exchanged worried glances, weighing the unfolding madness in the corner booth. The tension felt like a bowstring pulled too taut, ready to snap. Why me? She finally asked, trying to play it cool. I'm just a waitress. He chuckled softly, a sound that was both charming and chilling at once. Because, Margot, you are not just a waitress. Your rapid-fire Italian banter, your quick wit, it sets you apart. You've heard the stories. I offer you an invitation to a bigger game. Margot's breath caught in her throat. The diner, the people, everything faded as shadows danced in her mind. She thought of her dreams, her dead-end job, and the same tired faces that frequented the diner. But stepping into the unknown came with its own risks, a deck stacked with danger. Are you in? He pressed, his gaze locking onto hers, the weight of his expectation crashing down like a tidal wave. The room's energy crackled, urging her decision forward. Just then, a loud crash echoed from the kitchen, startling everyone. A pot had clattered to the floor, breaking the spell. Margot wheeled around, her heart racing, the momentary chaos giving her pause. When she turned back, the billionaire's expression had shifted slightly, a flicker of annoyance crossing his face. It was gone as quickly as it had come, but she could sense the danger brewing beneath the surface. Think carefully, Margot. Choices define destinies. The emphasis in his voice painted a clear picture. This was not merely an invitation, it was a warning. As she stood there, the weight of his words wrapped around her like chains, the world inside the diner swirled with anticipation. What would she choose? The facade of a quiet life or the thrill of the unknown? The diner, now still, held its breath along with her. Tomorrow would come, but who knew what it might bring? Moments later, the bell above the door jingled as a gust of wind blew through, shadowing the night outside. Just beyond those doors, the future was waiting, and Margot could sense it, a hushed promise of danger and opportunity. But what if she chose wrong? The question loomed over her like a storm cloud ready to burst. Make your decision soon, he murmured before standing, adjusting his suit as he prepared to leave, a predator vanishing into the night with all its prey in tow. Margot felt the room shift as he walked out, like the air leaving her lungs. She was left with nothing but the pounding of her heart and the dawning realization that her life, as she knew it, was about to change forever. In that moment, she stood teetering on the edge, wondering if she even had the strength to take the leap. And as the door swung closed behind him, a question echoed in her mind: what was she truly willing to risk for a taste of the extraordinary? The door swung shut behind him, but the tension lingered like an aftertaste. Margot stood frozen, staring at the spot where the billionaire had just been. A part of her felt exhilarated, electrified by his offer, while another part screamed at her to retreat, to hold on to the life she had always known. The diner resumed its mundane rhythm, but it felt different. The same chipped plates and worn booths now seemed to close in on her, betraying a world she suddenly viewed with weary eyes. She could hear the low murmur of customers chatting, but their voices blended into a monotonous hum, drowning in her inner struggle. A sinking feeling settled in her stomach. Her gaze flicked toward the kitchen where the commotion had erupted. The smell of burnt grease still hung in the air, a reminder that chaos was knocking on her door. Margot, are you okay? Sarah, a fellow waitress, approached, concern etched on her features. You look like you've seen a ghost. Margot hesitated. How could she explain what had just happened? Words failed her, and she felt vulnerable standing there in her waitress apron, the weight of indecision pressing heavily on her. Just lost in thought, I guess, she managed, shrugging it off. But the truth was more complex. The billionaire had awakened a hunger within her, a desire for something greater, something that terrified her to admit. With a deep breath, she poured herself a cup of coffee and tried to focus on her routine. Yet, the promise of the unknown flickered at the edges of her mind like a flame coaxing her closer. What if she didn't belong here? What if there was a world beyond these greasy floors that awaited her? As the minutes passed, the diner emptied, leaving only the regulars who clung to their breakfast plates. At closing time, when the last customer shuffled out, the bustling chatter turned to silence. Margot began stacking chairs, each clatter echoing in her head, the sound underscoring her turmoil. "Ready to go?" Sarah asked, her voice breaking through Margot's daze. "Yeah," Margot said, but her mind drifted back to the enigmatic stranger. She could still feel his presence lingering, his oppressive charm washing over her. She could practically hear his words, "Choices define destinies." Margot buzzed with anxiety. What was she prepared to leave behind? The routine of her life? The safety of familiarity? "Hey," Sarah said, snapping her fingers in front of Margot's face. "Earth to Margot. What is going on in that head of yours?" "Sorry, just thinking," she replied, shaking herself free from the weight of her thoughts. As they walked outside into the crisp night air, Margot felt the chill wrap around her. The streetlights flickered, casting long shadows on the pavement. Sarah's chatter about weekend plans faded into the background as Margot's pulse quickened. "Wait," she blurted, glancing back at the diner, the old sign flickering dimly behind her. "I think I need to go back. I forgot something." "Are you serious?" "It's late," Sarah protested. "I'll be quick," Margot insisted, then stepped back into the diner, which now felt like a portal to another dimension. The door swung shut behind her, sealing her inside the fading warmth while the night loomed outside. Her heart raced as she moved toward the booth where the billionaire had sat. She could almost feel him there, an imprint of an energy that sparked questions in her chest. What was this game he spoke of? The thought of possibilities roared in her mind, urging her to explore. Margot stopped, taking a deep breath to muster courage. What if she called his number? What if she dared to take that leap? The phone near the register buzzed in the stillness, a jarring reminder of the mundane. Her decision hung in the air, as heavy as the evening itself. Maybe tomorrow, she whispered to herself, but doubt crept in. Maybe tomorrow wouldn't he come? As she reached for the phone, a sudden crash echoed outside, shattering the quiet like glass. Her heart lurched. The sound resonated through the diner, making the hairs on the back of her neck stand at attention. What the hell was that? Margot whispered, her instincts flaring. The windows rattled ever so slightly, and she took a step back. Instinctively, her gaze darted toward the door. The outside world now felt so distant, as if a shadow had just eclipsed the light. Whatever was about to unfold, she could sense it wouldn't just change her life, it might transform everything. And then she heard voices outside, rising with urgency. She could feel a storm brewing, one that could either push her into the unknown or pull her back into safety. With her heart pounding like a drum, she stood poised at a decision point. What would she choose? Would she open the door to danger or risk it all for the chance of something breathtaking? Margot's breath hitched as she listened, straining to catch the voices drifting through the door. Panic prickled at the edges of her mind. She thought of Sarah, waiting outside, oblivious to the brewing storm. Would she leave? Or dare to poke her head into the chaos? The voices grew louder. "We can't just let him walk away," a man shouted, urgency lacing his tone. Margot's heart raced. Who were they? Why did it sound like something serious was happening? Unable to resist the pull, she took tentative steps towards the front window, peeking through the gaps in the blinds. Outside, shadows flitted in the yellow streetlight glow, frantic movements that hinted at desperation. "Get him!" another voice yelled. The fear in that command sent ice through Margot's veins. What did they want? Who were they after? Just as she leaned closer, a tall figure burst into view. It was a man, a stranger, his brow slick with sweat, his expression one of sheer terror. He glanced over his shoulder, eyes wide, before darting down the alley beside the diner. It felt like a scene from a movie, one she never thought she'd witness. The tension thickened as two more figures emerged from the darkness, men in dark jackets and baseball caps, their movements deliberate and predatory. Margot pressed her back against the wall, her heart pounding in her throat, terrified but glued to the unfolding drama. Then she heard the sharp crack of a gunshot. The sound shattered the night, quickly followed by a woman's scream that echoed through the streets, raw and haunting. Margot's breath caught. It was a sound that twisted in her gut, a visceral reminder of real danger. "Call the police!" Someone shouted, and in her daze, Margot felt the urge to do something or to run back to safety. But what if that man was innocent? What if they were hunting him for something he didn't do? Her mind whirled. Without thinking, she grabbed the phone off the register, her hands shaking. But what could she tell the police? Could she risk revealing herself? In the midst of her inner turmoil, the door swung open with a violent crash, and a wind whipped through the diner, sending papers and napkins flying. It was the man, the one who had run. He stumbled inside, panting, eyes darting like a trapped animal. "Help me," he gasped, slamming the door shut behind him, locking it just as the two men appeared outside, banging on the glass. "Let me in," he shouted, casting frantic glances at Margot. The raw fear in his voice pierced through her haze, compelling her to act. "Who are they?" Margot managed to ask, her mind racing. "What do you want?" "That doesn't matter," he replied, pressing himself against the door, his body shaking. "They're not what they seem. Just trust me." She hesitated, heart racing as the two men outside shouted threats, voices overlapping in a cacophony of anger. Her world had imploded in the span of moments. Everything she knew felt so far away. "Margot." Sarah's voice rang through her thoughts, and she suddenly realized the stakes were even higher. "They could be coming for you too." With a shaky breath, she looked at the man by the door. Questions flew through her mind. Was he telling the truth? Could she trust him? Before she could act, the men outside began breaking windows, shards exploding in a shower of glass and danger. They were relentless, shadows of menace bathed in the harsh glow of the street lamps. Fighting the instinct to run, she stepped forward, battling against the rising fear. "We can't let them in, we have to figure this out." "Then help me think," he shouted back, desperation lacing his voice. Margot's heart raced as she met his gaze. Now, trapped in this struggle between safety and risk, everything hinged on a choice. What would she decide? Would she stand with this stranger or turn her back and lock the door on danger? A decision loomed before her, dark and swirling, waiting to unfold. The pounding on the glass intensified, micromanaging her heartbeat as she weighed the chaos unfolding outside against the boy's fraught expression. "Who are they?" she demanded again, louder this time, gripped by an urgency she couldn't shake. The stranger, his features sharp and drawn tight, breathed heavily, backing further against the locked door. "It doesn't matter. They're coming for me, and I can't explain right now." Panic danced in his eyes, and Margot couldn't tell if it was fear for himself, or maybe fear of what she would do next. Skepticism bubbled in her throat. How could she trust someone she didn't know? But the morning rush would be far off, and she could already picture the diner filling with sleepy regulars, unaware of the storm brewing outside. Suddenly, a loud crack broke through her reverie. A gunshot resounded again, this time much closer. The sound ricocheted in her chest, stirring an instinct that screamed at her to run. She instinctively glanced towards the window just as one of the men outside ducked low, looking ready to charge at the door. "Don't!" she shouted, heart racing as she grabbed the man's arm. "You need to get down." He dropped to the side, barely making it out of the direct line of fire as the assailants repositioned themselves. The sight of their furious faces, now illuminated by the diner's neon light, sent icy fingers skimming over her skin. Their aggression was palpable, dark shadows of disdain creeping over each of their features. "Let him go," one of the men bellowed, his voice ruthless. "We don't need you getting involved." Margot felt the tremor in her hands, fear clawing at her insides. Did they really mean to silence him? Who were these people? She glanced toward the phone in her grasp, still hot from her panic. Call the police. What if doing so only escalated the danger? The weight of the decision hung like a noose around her neck. "Can you fight?" she asked suddenly, her voice barely more than a whisper, desperation in her tone. "Do you know how to protect yourself?" The man stared at her, bewildered. "No. Just help me." A part of her wanted to scream at him for being so helpless, while another part urged caution. She picked up a nearby wooden stool, hefting it over her shoulder, steeling herself. "If they come through this door, I'm not going down without a fight." A wild grin crossed his face, surprising her. "I like your spirit. But it might not be enough." Just as she prepared herself for the chaos about to erupt, the door shuddered violently with a terrible force. The wood creaked as one of the men began exerting pressure with his shoulder. "Get down!" Margot yelled, the movement instinctual as she dove behind the counter. The door gave way, bursting open, and splinters flew through the air like shrapnel. In that split second, everything slowed, adrenaline coursing through her veins. The invaders stood silhouetted against the night, aggressive and determined, each holding weapons that glinted menacingly in the diner light. With a primal scream, one of them lunged forward, and everything exploded into movement, chaos reigning supreme. Margot's heart thundered as she sprang into action, using the stool as a shield, ready to defend or attack whatever it took. The world narrowed in on her instincts as the panic of survival kicked in. But was it enough? In that tumultuous moment, she spotted Sarah's silhouette through the chaos, standing outside, curiosity blaring in her innocent stance, unaware of the thundercloud gathering above her head. "Get inside!" Margot shouted, fear slicing through her senses. But the words fell flat, the words lost in the maelstrom. What would happen next? Would Sarah be pulled into the pandemonium? Would Margot and the stranger make it through the night? The answer hung in the air, thick and suffocating, just waiting for the wrong twist to unfold. The air erupted with the clash of bodies and loud shouts, a discordant symphony of terror. Margot crouched low behind the counter, her heart lurching as she processed the chaos spinning around her. The heavy thud of boots on the diner's worn floor felt like a countdown to disaster. "Get back!" One of the armed men barked, charging through the splintered doorway, rage in his eyes. Margot gripped the stool tightly, knuckles white, as she readied herself. Her mind raced. She didn't know how to fight. She'd only ever served pancakes and coffee, but this felt like a nightmare that had slipped into her reality. A metallic clang echoed through the diner as one of the intruders slammed the door wide open, shattering any sense of sanctuary. "Where is he?" he shouted, scanning the room. The stranger behind her muttered something incoherent, his eyes darting between her and the advancing men, panic breaking the surface of his fear. "Margot, I just stay down," she hissed, hardly able to hear her own voice over the escalating tension. Outside, Sarah's small figure hovered near the entryway, confusion etched across her innocent face. She must have heard the gunshot, she must have felt the tremor in the air. "Margot?" she called, too sweet, too naive for a scene like this. The sight sent a wave of dread rolling through Margot's insides. "Get inside now!" Margot yelled, more desperate than before. But her plea was drowned out by a roar of one of the attackers pushing further into the diner. "Stop! Do not hurt her!" Margot shouted instinctively, her protective instinct surging ahead of logic. The man turned, a cruel smile spreading across his face, as if her fear only made the hunt that much sweeter. In that moment, everything shifted. The stranger beside her, filled with shaky determination, surged to his feet. "I'll distract them." You get her no. Margot cried, disbelief sparking like a match in her heart. I want to leave you. But he brushed past her, eyes blazing with something like courage, or maybe it was just madness. You have to protect her. He dashed towards the men, an impulsive act that shocked Margot to her core. The action was immediate. A gunshot rang out, drowning the diner in sickening noise, causing her to flinch hard. For a split second, Margot felt like everything had stopped. The world turned into frozen silence, her heart caught between beats, her breath snagged in her throat. Then chaos returned as the man tumbled to the ground, clutching his side. Run! He gasped, his face twisted in pain. With instinct compelling her forward, Margot scrambled around the counter, clutching the stool as she found herself at the threshold of the fray. Sarah! She shouted again, desperate to grab the child's attention. But her heart sank as she realized Sarah had taken a step back, fear dominating her expression. The diner's air was thick with the pungent smell of sweat and adrenaline, the sound of boots echoing against tile like thunder. Get her! One of the men screamed, locking eyes on Sarah, whose innocent fear transformed into a dazed bewilderment. Margot fought every impulse to turn and run for the girl. She couldn't abandon the stranger. He was key to her survival now. The decision screamed in her mind, but in that moment of wild uncertainty, she felt something else, a surge of raw, primal anger. Over here! Margot yelled, throwing the stool with all her might. It crashed at the feet of the nearest assailant, catching him off guard. In that heartbeat, she seized the moment. Sarah, come on! She screamed again, forcing all the authority she could muster into her voice, every ounce of maternal instinct igniting within her. As the child turned and ran for cover, Margot felt a sense of fleeting hope, but it was dashed by the stranger's pained cry. Margot! He yelled again, a flicker of desperation tinging his voice. His pain sharpened her senses, and she focused every fiber of her being on him, confusion swirling as she struggled to find a way to resolve the chaos. But before she could act, one of the men lunged. She could practically hear the low growl of excitement in him as he tried to seize control of the dire situation. Out of options, Margot locked eyes with the stranger, and in that moment, she heard Sarah's footsteps close behind her. What's the plan? The boy asked, bleeding and terrified. But what had she really signed up for? The diner's shadows loomed larger than before, their threats now tangible and suffocating as she prepared for whatever was coming. This fight was finally real. But would they be strong enough to face the impending storm? The questions spiraled in her mind, as she braced herself for the showdown that felt inevitable. Would they make it out, or would the dark swirl of fate consume them all? Time twisted and bent in the diner, each brutal second stretching painfully long as Margot steadied herself for the upcoming fight. Her heart raced, pounding like a drum echoing off the grimy walls. She felt the weight of the stranger's life pressing down on her, mixed with a desperate need to protect Sarah. Stay behind me! Margot shouted, her voice slicing through the chaos. She positioned herself as a barrier between danger and the girl, gripping the counter with white-knuckled intensity. But uncertainty gnawed at her. What could a waitress really do against armed men trained for violence? Before she could even think, the first thug lunged forward. Adrenaline surged through Margot, turning her fear into something almost feral. She threw herself sideways, arms swinging wildly as if to swipe away the darkness. Get the hell out of here! The man spat, but his threat was cut short by a cracking sound as Margot's stool collided with his knee, sending him crashing awkwardly to the ground. Just as she drew a breath of victory, she heard the heavy footsteps rushing from behind the counter. It was a second attacker, rage plastered across his features as he lunged at her from the shadows. Panic spiked in her chest, but no one needed to die today, not on her watch. Sarah! Now! She commanded, her voice taking on the tonality of iron and urgency. The child froze, eyes wide, as if the diner had transformed into a realm of monsters. But Margot's stare pierced her hesitation, urging her to move. In that intense moment, the stranger groaned, struggling to lift his head as he shouted, "Run, Don't look back. Margot's heart split. If Sarah made it out, maybe, just maybe, she could find help. Go. I'll hold them off. The sheer force of her words seemed to propel Sarah towards the door, scrambling past debris scattered on the floor. The larger thug was pulling himself up, his eyes ablaze with fury. Margot couldn't let him take her down. Drawing on a reservoir of strength she didn't know she had, she flung a condiment bottle at him, a last-ditch effort that struck him square in the face. Bitch! He spat, staggering backward, fury fueling his movements. Margot seized the moment. She reached for anything that could serve as a weapon, her hands fumbling till they found an iron frying pan. It felt heavy but oddly comforting, as if calling to her instincts. No! The attacker yelled, charging at her again. With one mighty swing, Margot brought the pan down. A resonating crash echoed in the room, and she felt the sting of exhilaration surging through her. The blow connected, sending the man sprawling to the ground, dazed and out of control. You want more? She shouted into the chaos surrounding her, surprise mingling with ferocity. In that instant, she realized she had crossed a threshold. The fear that had held her captive was vanishing, replaced by sheer survival instinct. But just as she thought she might gain ground, a sharp pain exploded in her side, driving the breath from her lungs. She turned in horror, seeing the last man, gun raised, satisfaction edging his brutal grin. Firing squad S here, sweetheart. He taunted, stepping closer. Margot's world began to fade, shadows closing in around her. She wouldn't let it end here, not now, not when lives were at stake. Adrenaline shot through her, combining with a wild determination. She would not become a victim today. Sarah! Margot screamed, the word bursting forth from her lips. The little girl was still in sight, clinging to the doorframe as if it were a lifeline. Just then, an unexpected explosion rattled the diner, a screeching noise that echoed and made the walls tremble. What was that? As every head in the diner turned in shock, Margot felt the world shift beneath her once more. The last assailant seemed to seize at the sudden tumult. She used the diversion to claw herself upright, the frypan gripped tightly in her fist, ready for whatever came next. Would this newfound chaos be their savior, or was it just the beginning of an even darker descent? Through the ringing silence that followed the explosion, one question loomed heavy: who or what had just arrived at the heart of their nightmare? The diner's lights flickered, casting eerie shadows on the walls as Margot struggled to get her bearings. The explosion had thrown everyone into disarray, sending the last thug's confident smile crashing along with the spirit of his impending violence. Footsteps thundered outside, their intensity rising in a wild cadence that sent shivers racing down Margot's spine. She could feel her heart pounding in rhythm with each approaching beat. The enormity of the situation didn't escape her. This was no ordinary rescue, and this was no ordinary night. She had unleashed a force, but now she had no idea what it might reveal. Margot's breath came in quick, shallow rasps. She glanced over to Sarah, who was anxiously peering out from behind the doorframe. The girl looked small, vulnerable, but filled with the resolve of youth. Get inside the kitchen. Margot shouted, her voice hoarse but fierce. The little girl hesitated, but the urgency on Margot's face pushed her into action. Sarah dashed quickly, eyes darting nervously. Margot's own heart thundered painfully as she took a quick inventory of her surroundings. The diner was full of shattered glass and scattered chairs. The chaos mirrored her disheveled emotions. Suddenly, the front door swung open, slamming against the wall with enough force to rattle the dishes. Margot turned, frying pan raised high, ready to confront whoever dared step into her fray. A silhouette appeared in the doorway, backlit by the streetlight. It was a figure draped in shadows, but even in that dim light, it was obvious they weren't armed. Still, Margot wasn't going to lower her guard. Who are you? She shouted, her voice taut like a bowstring. Margot. The figure called urgently, stepping into the diner. Recognition struck her like a bolt of lightning. It was Police Officer Hart, his uniform slightly disheveled, a worried expression etched across his face. Get down. Before he could finish, the sound of gunfire erupted from the street, punctuated by the sickening whump of an explosion. The force sent Margot sprawling to the ground, pain shooting through her sides, but she was far too alert to let it own her. Stay down. Hart shouted, rushing toward her, his eyes scanning the eerie stillness of the diner as if he were searching for ghosts. We have to get you both out of here. Margot breathed in deep, savoring the fleeting safety of his presence. They have guns, Hart. There's a child I know, he interrupted, urgency sharpening his voice. But we can't just hide. We need to move. Panic clawed inside her. She wavered between following his commands and the instinct to protect Sarah. There might be more of them coming. We need to. Another boom echoed outside, this one even louder. The ground vibrated beneath them, and the air crackled with tension. This time, Margot caught a glimpse of shadows moving outside, shapes darting behind abandoned cars. Move now. Hart gripped her arm firmly, yanking her toward the back of the diner, his authority cutting through her fear. She tore her gaze away from the entrance, filled with the terror of what was to come, and raced after him. As they hurried down the narrow hallway toward the kitchen, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The shadows hadn't just been after her, they had wanted something more, and now that chaos had surged into the diner, she felt a dread sinking deep into her gut. They emerged into the kitchen, which was dimly lit and smelled of burnt grease. The back door stood ajar, a perilous escape route. But what awaited them outside was a mystery wrapped in horror. With shaky breaths, Hart fixed Margot with an intense stare. Whatever happens out there, stay close to me. We're facing something worse than we ever expected. Margot nodded, her heart racing with fear and determination. She was already deep into this nightmare, and it wasn't over yet. She had to know what lay beyond the diner doors, even if it meant facing the abyss. The thud of footsteps approached. The stakes were rising, and they were running out of time. What were they getting ready to face? Was it the gang, or something even more sinister? As the back door creaked ominously, a singular thought struck her: who or what was still hunting them now? The back door swung open with a grating creak, revealing the darkened alley behind the diner, shrouded in acrid smoke and the distant echo of sirens. Margot's instincts screamed at her to hold back, to wait, but Hart was already stepping into the chaos. Follow me, he urged, his voice steady despite the turmoil, but fire swirled within Margot. The urge to protect Sarah was instinctual. She grabbed the frying pan, fear eclipsed by determination. The alley was a scene out of a nightmare, strewn with debris that had once belonged to the diner. Smashed metal and shattered glass punctuated the ground like cruel reminders. Shadows melded and split in the smoke, casting warped shapes as her eyes frantically adjusted to the dimness. Where's Sarah? Her heart dropped when she couldn't see the girl behind her. Panic clawed at her throat, tightening with every breath. Over here. Sarah's small voice burst through the haze, trembling yet undeterred as she huddled behind a dumpster, her fingers trembling as she clutched her teddy bear. Margot darted towards her, ready to shield her from whatever horror lurked just beyond sight. Get up. We have to stick together. Hart was scanning the periphery, his focus fierce. We don't have much time. Keep low. Suddenly, the explosion that had rung out earlier turned into a haunting echo of laughter, chilling and mocking. Margot froze, her blood running cold. Who would be laughing in the middle of a war zone? The footsteps were closer now, pounding like thunder against the pavement, taunting her, echoing in her skull. Now. Hart barked, grabbing Margot's arm to pull her back into the alley's shadows. But just as they were about to turn, figures appeared near the alley entrance, silhouetted against the building's flickering lights. They moved with a purpose, weapons drawn, and the unmistakable shimmer of cold steel glinted under the streetlights. Crap, Margot whispered, her stomach twisting. We're trapped. Hart pressed against the wall, eyes narrow and calculating. We can't panic. We stick to the agenda. Get down. One of the figures shouted, cutting Hart's ordered calm. Margot dropped instinctively, holding Sarah close as bullets began to fly, ricocheting against the bricks, sending splinters of masonry flying. A scream pierced the air, the sound of another victim lost to this madness. She felt the heat of the near misses, the thrum of danger pulsing around them like a living thing. Back inside! Hart shouted, grabbing Sarah and yanking Margot back. Now! They dashed back towards the diner, wooden doors splintered and swinging wildly in the chaos. Inside, the familiar smell of grease now felt more like a tomb. Margot sprinted, her mind racing, every heartbeat a reminder of what was to come. Lock it! Hart's voice rang with authority. I'll hold them off. Margot's heart sank at the thought of him throwing himself into danger like this. No. You can't. I won't let them get to you. He pleaded desperately. The barricade of chairs piled against the door trembled as another body collided against it. Outside, the laughter had returned, ringing high and sinister like the chime of a death knell. Margot's legs shook, fear intertwining with the weight of what was about to be unleashed. She couldn't let this be the eulogy for a young girl meant to shine. What if they're searching for something? Margot whispered, the desperate thought leaking through her panicked fog. What if it's about more than us? Hart paused, brows furrowing, realization dawning. More than us, like a message. Just as Margot was about to respond, a loud crack echoed through the diner, cutting through the noise. The lights flickered again, then went out, plunging them into darkness. The oppressive silence swallowed her whole, only to be shattered by ominous footsteps thudding into the diner. Her heart raced. What had they awakened? With one last grasp of courage, Margot tightened her grip on the frying pan. There was only one question that mattered now: how far would they go to claim what they wanted? And as the footsteps approached, she braced herself, ready to find out just what horror lay ahead. The darkness wrapped around them like a cold blanket, silence reigning supreme, broken only by the rapid thuds of Margot's heart echoing in her ears. The shadows dove deeper, alive with threat, as Margot strained to adjust her vision. She could barely see through the chaos. But she didn't need to see, she needed to act. Suddenly, the overhead fluorescent lights flickered back to life, casting a harsh glare across the diner. Through the obscured windows, she caught sight of the chaos outside. Figures lurched into view, illuminated against the shrieks of police sirens wailing in the distance. The gang was here, eyes glaring with an overconfident mixture of rage and amusement. Stick together! Hart barked again. The authority in his voice cut through the growing dread that threatened to swallow them whole. Not willing to back down now, Margot moved closer to Sarah, whose eyes shimmered with fear but held a flicker of determination. But what if this was it? Was she really prepared for the confrontation that loomed ahead, one she had only imagined in the confines of her mind? The sound of their footsteps grew louder, desperation tightening Margot's insides. We can't hide forever. She whispered harshly, the urgency clawing at her throat. Hart nodded, determination fueled by fierce defiance. Without a second thought, he turned to face the door, controlling the fear that threatened to consume him too. On three. We pushed to the back entrance. Ready? Margot bit her lip, steeling herself. In that moment, nothing mattered more than saving Sarah. 1, 2, 3. Margot surged forward, with Hart and Sarah flanking her on either side as they barreled toward the back of the diner. The dining area erupted in a fistfight, the men outside shouting threats, rancorous chaos rolling off them like smoke. Just as they made it to the hallway, a loud crash erupted behind them. Glass shattered like shards of a broken sky. The door. They're coming in. The sound bolstered Margot's resolve. No turning back now. Hart dove towards the kitchen door, yanking it open desperately. Go, go, go. Margot took Sarah's arm firmly and pushed her through, refusing to let go. The panic of flight mingled with adrenaline as they sprinted toward the back exit. The world shrank around them, all that mattered was getting out alive. A sudden shape loomed directly in their path, a dark figure blocking their exit, weapon poised. Margot's heartbeat quickened. "Stop!" shouted the man, his voice slicing through the rising tension. Margot refused to falter. With sheer instinct, she swung the frying pan with all her might. It caught him off guard, sending him sprawling to the ground with a satisfying clatter. "Come on!" she shouted to Hart, who was momentarily stunned. Sarah clung to Margot's side, wide-eyed but resolute. They bolted through the door, the early morning air rushing at them, bracing against the cool chill that greeted them. "Keep running," Hart urged, guiding Sarah parallel to him, as Margot kept watch behind, fear morphing into a fierce drive. They darted through the alley, the sounds of their pursuers still echoing in the distance. Suddenly, Margot heard voices, not the angry shouts of men seeking vengeance, but a higher-pitched voice calling out. "Margot! Margot! Sarah!" Margot spun around, confused, and saw her tiny friend finally find the strength to push past them. "Margot!" Sarah cried out again, pointing toward the road where a police car whirled into view, sirens blaring. Relief washed over Margot like a warm wave as uniformed officers swarmed the area, ushering the remaining figures into the shadows of their retreat. The sweet smell of safety rushed at them, but it still felt surreal, as if they were trapped in a dream. Margot felt her legs buckle beneath her, the weight of adrenaline dispelling as the gravity of their escape hit as police officers began to separate the chaos. Margot clutched onto Sarah, feeling the once familiar tension evaporate. "You did it," she whispered to the girl, who looked up, eyes bright. The innocence of childhood radiated off her, the battle far behind them now. Hart approached, urgency translated into a gentle tone. "You okay, Margot? You were incredible back there." The pride in his voice wrapped around her, warm and inviting as the realization set in she was stronger than she had ever known. With a hesitant smile, Margot nodded, the pain slowly fading. "I just wanted to protect her," she said, looking down at Sarah. The girl's trust was beautiful, pushing Margot forward, teaching her she was capable of facing anything that came her way. In that moment, the world around them began to settle. The sirens faded, and the distant commotion became mere background noise to the realization that she had outshone all the doubts that had clouded her life. The sensation brought a lump to her throat, tears of relief threatening to break free. They had faced darkness and lived to tell the tale. The night had changed everything, plucking her from the shadows of anonymity and turning her into more than just a waitress. As they regrouped with the officers, she looked back at the diner, its lights flickering like stars, timeless, and now, revitalized. Margot had stepped into the unknown, and for once, she felt whole. She waved a final goodbye to her old life, knowing tomorrow would usher in an uncertain new chapter. The path ahead was still murky, but as long as they stood together, it was a journey worth embarking on. As her heart swelled with newfound strength, she realized that she was ready to embrace the next adventure, whatever that may hold. And as they stepped boldly into the light, the horizon sparkled with infinite possibilities. Now, here's the real call to action. I need you to subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss the next exclusive stories. This is the moment to show your support. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm. And don't forget to flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about the ending. You need to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to share. Only true fans understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions. Let us do this.